Imagine going to a store, having a successful shopping trip, heading back to your car, thinking you're just going to go on with your day. And as you're almost there, you turn your head and see a truck barreling 40 miles an hour right at you with no time to react. Go ahead and open your eyes. That's where this portion of my story begins. Okay. My mom, my brother, and I went to our local Walmart to get a 1-inch paintbrush. And anybody who's like seen me in any capacity, or even in the last 45 seconds of listening to me, you probably know I've got a ton of energy. So it's probably not a surprise that I was the first one to the car. I wanted to get home and put that 1-inch paintbrush to use. This is back in the days before key fobs. So I had to wait for my mom to physically catch up, put the key in the door, turn it so we could get on with our day. So as I'm standing there waiting, her and my brother are 4 or 5 feet behind me. A truck pulls up in front of the store. Driver and middle passenger get out. Passenger all the way to the right feels the truck moving backwards. So he moves over to put his foot on the brake, just like any one of us would do, Chris, but he instead hit the gas. Combination of shock and force threw him up onto the steering wheel, up onto the dashboard, and before you know it, he's catapulting 40 miles an hour across the parking lot right at us with no time to react. Now we're in an end spot, so he goes up and over the median, up and over the tree in the median, hits our car, knocks me over, runs over me diagonally, tears my spleen, leaves a tire track scar on my stomach, and continues on to completely sever my left arm from my body. So there I am laying on the parking lot on a 115-degree day in Phoenix, Arizona. My mom and brother just watched this whole thing happen, and now they see my arm laying 10 feet away from my body.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Most of us never learned how to train our brains, which is why most of us needlessly settle, struggle, and worse, suffer. My name is Chris Doris, and I want to make brain training mainstream. This is my series, Tough Talks, Conversations on Mental Toughness. I'm interviewing badasses from all walks of life on what mental toughness means to them and their unique approaches to strengthening their minds. Hey guys, welcome back to Tough Talks, Conversations on Mental Toughness. I am your host, Chris Doris, and before I introduce you to you today, our guest for today's episode, I wanted to hit on one housekeeping item. If you're not getting notified of these new Tough Talks episodes, then that means you're also not getting notified of my blog, my new blog post releases, which by the way are on every Tuesday. And you may or may not be then also getting my daily dose mental toughness tips in 30 seconds or less every single morning, 365 days a year, delivered straight to your email inbox around 6 a.m. your time, local time, wherever you are in the world. If that's the case, let's go ahead and address that situation, shall we? By going to ChristopherDoris.com/lists. Christopher Doris, DORRIS, .com/lists, LISTS, and just put your email, first name, bam, problem solved. Our guest today is a new friend of mine. His name is Brian Bogert, and this man is a bona fide genius and has a phenomenal story, which I'm going to let him tell you. I'm going to read a tiny bit of his bio. Right, his website gives a very thorough. His about page gives a remarkably thorough, actually series of introductions to him. His bios. He's got a professional bio, a community bio, and then a personal bio. But I'm not going to read any of that to you. I'm just going to give the tiny bios that he has on his homepage, brianbogert.com. Brian Bogert is a passionate performance coach, motivational speaker, business strategist, top sales professional, and philanthropic leader who believes in helping growth-minded individuals achieve the best versions of themselves, their most authentic selves. Brian teaches how to leverage radical authenticity and awareness, we're going to ask him to unpack that, to create the intentional life you've been dreaming of but have struggled to create on your own. His revolutionary strategy, embrace pain to avoid suffering. We're totally unpacking that. His revolutionary strategy, embrace pain to avoid suffering, has helped individuals, groups, and entire companies break beyond their normal to achieve the success in life and business that they've always wanted. If you want to create a life of no limits, Brian and his team will get you there. I'm going to let him explain the rest of his bio. I'm going to ask him to start with a story. And he's going to grab your attention straight out of the chute. Fasten your seatbelts, folks. All right, let's go find him. He's here waiting for us. Where are you, Brian? There he is. Brian Bogert. What up, dog?
Man, I'm just happy to be here with you.
I'm super pumped to have you here, man. I had to postpone because we had a little COVID situation over here.
Yeah.
which I am very blessed to be able to say was a mild case. And we're all better now.
That's good.
But it was interesting because you'll appreciate this. We're both in pretty damn similar industry. And there's a lot of fear around that.
Oh, tons.
And this isn't our subject matter for the day, of course, but I got to admit, when I tested positive, I got pretty freaking scared.
Well, yeah. There's a lot going on in the world right now. We're hearing a whole lot of narratives around this. So,
and we're in Arizona.
Yeah.
Right. So, you are a human behavior and performance coach and speaker, and probably several other things as well. As you create a ton of content. So I want to get to all that, but this is where I'd love to start if you're cool with this.
Yeah.
2 questions. 1, what happened to you when you were 7 years old? And
Yep.
2, how did that shape the course of how you've chosen to use the rest of your life? Is that cool?
Yeah, brother. I'm going to bring some fire on this real quick because that answer is really easy for me, both of them. So I'm going to ask anybody who's watching or listening, unless you're driving, to just close your eyes for 1 second. I'll tell you when to reopen them. Imagine going to a store, having a successful shopping trip, heading back to your car, thinking you're just going to go on with your day. And as you're almost there, you turn your head and see a truck barreling 40 miles an hour right at you with no time to react. Go ahead and open your eyes. That's where this portion of my story begins. Okay. My mom, my brother, and I went to our local Walmart to get a 1-inch paintbrush. And anybody who's seen me in any capacity, or even in the last 45 seconds of listening to me, you probably know I've got a ton of energy. So it's probably not a surprise that I was the first one to the car. I wanted to get home and put that 1-inch paintbrush to use. This is back in the days before key fobs. So I had to wait for my mom to physically catch up, put the key in the door, turn it so we could get on with our day. So as I'm standing there waiting, her and my brother are 4 or 5 feet behind me. A truck pulls up in front of the store. Driver and middle passenger get out. Passenger all the way to the right feels the truck moving backwards. So he moves over to put his foot on the brake, just like any one of us would do, Chris, but he instead hit the gas. Combination of shock and force threw him up onto the steering wheel, up onto the dashboard, and before you know it, he's catapulting 40 miles an hour across the parking lot right at us with no time to react. Now we're in an end spot, so he goes up and over the median, up and over the tree in the median, hits our car, knocks me over, runs over me diagonally, tears my spleen, leaves a tire track scar on my stomach, and continues on to completely sever my left arm from my body. So there I am laying on the parking lot on a 115-degree day in Phoenix, Arizona. My mom and brother just watched this whole thing happen, and now they see my arm laying 10 feet away from my body.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And fortunately for me, my guardian angel walked out of the store right when this happened. So there was a nurse that saw the whole thing take place, and she saw the literal life and limb scenario in front of her. Wow. And she rushed immediately into action. She came over to put her hands on the wound and stop the bleeding to save my life. And then she instructed some innocent bystanders to run inside, grab a cooler, fill it with ice, and get my arm on ice within minutes. Had she not done one or both of those things, Chris, I either wouldn't be here with you today, or I'd be here with you today with a cleaned up stump. That's just the facts, right? Wow. Now I'll expedite through a whole lot of the rest of the story because I'm sure you can imagine there's lots that we can unpack here. Yeah. But what I have realized in all of my time of doing this is I have a pretty unique story, right? But I've also realized that we all have a unique story. And what's important is that we pause and become aware of the lessons we can extract from our stories and then become intentional with how do we apply them in our lives. And we all have the ability to do that. We also
can
all
slow
have
that down? Because that's absolutely, that's a mic drop moment, number 1, maybe 2. Okay, can you repeat that?
Yeah.
I know that's something that you say a lot. It's part of your whole brand, right? And it's one of the very first things you and I ever spoke of. And I think it's really huge. So could you re-articulate that for us?
So we all have unique stories.
Mm-hmm.
What's important is that we pause and become aware of the lessons we can extract from our stories and then become intentional with how do we apply them in our lives. Mm. And we all have the ability to do that. Mm. We also all have the ability to tap into the collective wisdom of other people's stories to shorten our own curve to learning. So I'm going to share with you 2 primary stories. As I'm sure you can imagine, there's hundreds, but these are 2 that have really shaped my life. Okay. The first is I learned not to get stuck by what had happened to me, but instead get moved by what I could do with it.
Okay. Well, okay. Here we go, folks. I hope you're not driving.
Another mic drop.
Just get your paper and pen out now. All right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And the second, I didn't realize until far later. You see, at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, although I was very much a part of my process, I was the one having surgeries, I was the one having to do the work in therapy, I was also being guided through the process. So I was in a fog, right? My parents, however, were not. They were intimately aware of the unceasing medical treatments, the years of physical therapy, and the idea of seeing their son grow up without the use of his left arm was a source of great potential suffering for them. So they literally willed themselves day in and day out to do what was necessary, what was tough, to embrace the pains to ultimately strengthen and heal me. So whether it was intentional or not, what they did was ingrain in me a philosophy and a way of living, which was to embrace pain to avoid suffering. And when I believe this is done right, it's also how we gain freedom. So it's this same concept that I've used to not only overcome this unique injury, but how my business partners and I scaled our last business to 15 million within the span of a decade, and how now I flipped that on its head as a human behavior and performance coach to work with hundreds of individuals and organizations just like you, just like the people listening, to become more aware, more intentional, and who they already are, their most authentic selves. You see, I believe that's when the door cracks to perspective, motivation, and direction. And that's also when we can have joy, freedom, and fulfillment come back into our lives. And that's the reason that I've committed the next 25 years of my life to impacting 1 billion people. Because if we
heard that, you heard it. He said billion.
The B. Yeah. Because I genuinely believe that if we can reduce the level of suffering on this planet and allow joy, freedom, and fulfillment to come back in, and allow people to be celebrated for exactly who they are, without judgment, without criteria, without being boxed in somewhere, that's when the binds of human connection get even stronger, and we can actually move forward and together in this world in a place that hopefully my kids and grandkids will experience a much more beautiful place.
Well, I don't really think there's anything that we could talk about in all of that. There's only about 17 things that you said that I wanted to, like you said, unpack. Let's go here. Well, the first of the two stories, right, is that don't get stuck by what's happened to me, but get moved by what I can do with it. Is that a decent articulation of it?
You said it verbatim. It was perfect.
Roger that. So that is I've had a couple great coaches in my life. One of them is named Steve Chandler.
Yep.
And he does an amazing job of articulating the distinction between an owner and a victim. In fact, he's got an audio program called The Owner Victim Choice.
Yeah.
And you're talking that language, which is how to choose to be an owner, to own we'll just use some victim language, happened to you.
Yeah.
But that's not even necessarily victim. I mean, it did happen to you. That happened to you. You got run over by a truck and your arm was ripped off your body. That happened to you.
Correct.
And then you've chosen to create from it. Let me ask you this question. I had this thought before. I'm curious about this. You were 7 years old. Mm-hmm. Did you get into like the why me mentality? Like, holy shit, you did?
Absolutely.
And how long did you you're sure you're not there now. How long did you stay in that?
Only a few days.
Only a few days?
No, legitimately, because here's the thing. Perspective points us at what's important. Okay, now I remember the evolution of thought. And it does sound crazy as a 7-year-old that this could even be the thought, but I did. First, I thought it was a dream. And I kept waiting for myself to wake up. Then when I woke up, which I was awake, I just didn't realize I was awake because I was unconscious really for a little period of time. But once I started to be awake and realize that what was happening in front of me was real, then I immediately went into that, why me? What am I going to do with the rest of my life? Like feeling sorry for myself, legitimately. And the reason I say I got snapped out of it pretty quickly is because perspective points us to what's important. We had families in the ICU coming up to us right out of the gate saying, we're so sorry for what happened to you. It's so horrible. Oh my gosh, we can't even imagine what you're going through. What can we do to help you? And then come to find out their kid that's laying in the ICU bed next to me doesn't know if they're going to live for another 30 days because of the terminal illness that they're dealing with. Right? I knew, and it was very clear, even at that age, other than the immediate threat to my life and not knowing whether or not I'd have use of my arm at that point. I mean, we were 1 or 2 surgeries in of 24, right? Like the reconstruction had not even really begun. But I knew that outside of the immediate threat to my life, I was going to live. And through the course of the next 10 years, as I was in the hospital, I worked in a philanthropic way. I have a unique story. So I was on stage very early trying to give perspective, motivation, and direction to people. And we also started raising money for the Children's Hospital way back when. Well, over the course of the first 10 years, and by the time I was 18, I lost like 15 other people that were in my hospital journey with me to a terminal illness. Perspective points you at what's important, right? I might have an arm that's a little bit smaller. I might have an arm that I don't have a tricep. I don't have a lat on the left side of my back. My bicep is my gracilis. I might have different elements of pain because of an imbalance in my body. But guess what? I live a happy, healthy, and productive life. Well, so, you know, it's hard to be stuck by what happened to me, because those individuals, those lives, they're not even on this planet any longer.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here with you, okay, for the sake of thoroughness and service. Because there's a lot of people that are stuck in victim mentalities, bro, that didn't have their arms severed, okay?
Yeah.
And who are also conscious of the stories that you're calling perspective, but they're not getting perspective from it.
They're not looking for perspective.
What?
They're not looking for perspective.
Well, you were at 7?
I wasn't looking for it, but I couldn't refuse what I saw in front of me.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just the reality of it. And I fortunately had parents that ingrained perspective. But you know, here's the thing. Our minds process 11 million bits of information per second, and we're only consciously aware of about 40. So what that says is that we're actually largely led by the unconscious. And so until we go through a systematic process to move the unconscious to the conscious, the unaware to the aware, it's going to feel like life is happening to us, like it's fate, like we're a victim. One thing that I've always had from a very young age is I've always had an ability to raise my level of awareness, my own self-awareness. I've always been very aware of what's going around me. So perspective is easy for me to absorb, but it isn't easy for everybody. And sometimes it does require you to seek perspective. And so I think there's a lot of people that get stuck because they do believe that life is happening to them, like something is taking place that they can't control. They don't feel like they have influence or control over their destiny. That's what so many people desire. They want to have influence or control over what happens in their life. Now, clearly you can't control external events like this. My arm got ripped off, but I can absolutely choose how I respond to it.
Okay, so that's huge, right? You have absolute control over how you choose to interpret events. I think everybody that's listening to this podcast has heard that about 1,000 times in some form or fashion.
Probably.
Not even from this podcast. The only reason they'd be listening to this one is because they're into that kind of deal.
Yeah.
You're not going to tune into this conversation unless you're already hip to the whole, awareness of like why somebody going to listen to Tough Talks conversations on mental toughness, because they're interested in that. And they've, so they've always heard like the life is 90% what happens to you, and 10% what happens to you, 90% like
90% how you respond to it. Yeah, something like that.
All those things, right? But let's slow it down again, and really, really offer the audience here the gift of something that I think you are tremendous expert at, which is how. There are so many sources that reinforce victim thinking in our world, in our lives, in each of our lives. None of us are exempt from that, not even close. How do you, if you had to, I doubt that this is part of your work, you probably don't attract clients who need this level of coaching, like out of deep victim, right? But if for some reason you had this commit like a couple of years of your professional existence to working with people that were really, really stuck in the victim happening to me world of thought, how would you get them out? How would you inspire them to choose to be creators and owners of their lives so that they can even articulate sentences like you're dropping like nothing over here? Like, don't get stuck by what's happening to you. Get moved by what you can do with it. Embrace pain to avoid suffering. And they're like, what?
Yeah. So there's this concept that I actually have been playing with for a little while, and I've talked about it a few times. I think what we have to start to realize as individuals, and I think people who are in that victim mentality, they need to see it this way. So this is probably where I would start. And then I would facilitate by asking a lot of questions. So I'll go there next. But where I would start is Nobody gets through this life unscathed. Nobody. If you're still standing today, you've been knocked on your ass and you've stood back up in some capacity. You may be stuck, but you've at least stood back up. You're probably not still on your knees or you wouldn't be standing here today. Okay? So there's an element to the fact that we are all survivors. And if we're survivors, we can be thrivers. But here's the flip. Most people, because they feel like life is happening to them, because there's a lack of ownership, because they feel like a victim, they also feel like they need to be saved. Like they're waiting for a hero to come in and drop something on them so that they can just be lifted up. And it's the narratives like, if I only get here, then, if I could only meet this person, then, right? It's this future focused piece that's so far out of reality, and it doesn't bring it back down to the tangible elements of being where our feet are and focusing on what we can control right now. We don't need any more 7-step systems out there on how to get rich or get quick or raise your level of awareness, right? What those do is they feed on the victim mentality because they tip into the negative emotions like fear, guilt, shame, anxiety, and scarcity in a way to create a gap that whoever's pushing that system can fill the gap and be like, I'm here to save you. Flip the mentality. Nobody's going to save you. So you need to become your own hero.
No one's
your
coming
own
to save
savior.
Yeah.
Now, what I would encourage instead is find a guide. Don't find a hero. Don't find a savior. Find a guide that can teach you, that can elevate and empower you to take yourself through the depths of your despair, who can teach you how to escape that adversary that's always in pursuit, that's literally trying to crush you by making you feel like a victim. You can escape it. You can have influence and control of your destiny, but it starts with understanding that nobody's going to do it for you.
That's not playing devil's advocate again, because
I love it.
I'm picking up what you're throwing down, but for the sake of service, I
love it. Let's do it.
That sounds really, really hard, man.
It is hard.
Like as I just listened to you, it's like it could be emotionally exhausting. Just the notion. It sounds like it could even be easier to just try to get through life. Okay, survive. You said something. I wrote it down. You said if we're survivors, we can be thrivers.
Yep.
Can you hear me okay right now? My computer's telling me I got it.
I can. You froze a little bit, but I heard everything you said.
Okay. All right, cool. My computer has a habit of telling me that I have issues. So yeah. So it is hard. So you're saying this is hard. What's hard?
It's absolutely hard. All of it. I mean, recognizing that you are feeling stuck, recognizing that you feel like a victim, recognizing that there's probably some emotional trigger or behavioral pattern that's keeping you in that self-defeating path, right? Recognizing these things and admitting it are hard. But here's the thing, like this is where the embrace, pain, avoid suffering concept comes in. So I'm going to drop something real quick here because this is something important. It is hard, okay? The world literally tells us to reduce, eliminate, or avoid pain. Period. That's what the world tells us. That's the narrative. And that makes sense based on the evolutionary response from pure survival way back when we had to like run from dinosaurs and stuff or whatever, right?
Right.
But that's not the world we live in today. And so I'm telling you that the narrative is wrong. The world is wrong. We need to understand pain and we need to understand suffering. Pain is literally defined as short-term, intermittent, and a direct cause from something and alleviated once that direct cause is removed. Okay? And pain gets lots of attention because we feel it. It's real. It's right here. But the only thing that we can measure about it is that it's a universal human experience. We can't measure how you experience pain versus how I experience pain. Pain is pain. We all experience it. So that's guaranteed. What we do as humans then is we try to clarify it with adjectives like acute and chronic. Acute maintains the definition. Chronic inherently changes it because it implies that it's not short-term and it persists after that direct cause is removed. So let's stop calling that chronic pain and call it suffering. Suffering sounds a lot worse, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay. Nobody wants to admit that suffering exists, particularly when it's a direct result of our choices. And so it is hard, but we need to understand this concept. We can embrace the pain of hitting the gym for 30 minutes a day to avoid the suffering of aches and pains of a sedentary lifestyle. We can embrace the pain of having a difficult conversation with a loved one or spouse to avoid the suffering of having a loveless marriage that ends in divorce or being stuck in a marriage when we really want or need a divorce. We can embrace the pain of the fit our kids are sure to throw by having them put down their mobile devices at the dinner table to avoid the suffering of years of lost meaningful connection we'll never get back. We can embrace the pain of acknowledging and accepting that we are in a victim mentality, that we are stuck, and putting the work in to seek the help that's necessary to avoid the suffering of remaining an empty shell of who we actually are. I believe we all must choose our pain, or our suffering will choose us. So it is hard. But which one do you want? Do you want pain or do you want
You're
suffering?
Right. So is it really hard? Like what's really harder? Is suffering.
Every time.
So that's the paradox. Is like,
That's right.
oh, it's so hard. Well, not necessarily compared to, right?
Well, and if we want to put a positive lens on this, right? Like we know that experts in habit formation talk about all new habits having an upfront energy tax. Hard. We view new habits as a cost, an expense, hard. Okay? Just flip it on its head.
And what do you get?
An investment in your future self.
Right. So that's the why. Why would we invest? Here's a question I had for you, which is let's talk about a slightly different population of people as opposed to before we were talking about people that are really truly stuck in victim thinking.
Yeah.
But so maybe it's not entirely. Let me just ask the question. Is it possible for successful people? Let me, I'm using air quotes if you're just
I saw that. Yep.
because the reason that I'm using air quotes is because when I say the word success in this context is the conventional definition of success, which is so far from mine. But for the sake of thoroughness in our conversation, I'm using the conventional definition would be like power, money.
Yep.
All right. Recognition, acknowledgement, and financial wealth.
Yep.
Okay. Can people who have financial wealth, power, and recognition still be victims?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think having somebody who can materialize something, build something, create something, doesn't necessarily mean that they're free. Being a victim is a mindset of being trapped. I think you can absolutely be successful based on the way the world has defined it and still be a victim. In fact, that's the core individual that I work with, frankly, is those high performers that have had a high degree of financial success. And the reality of it is so many of them, and this is how I was in my old world, right? Running with people earning multiple 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, who've reached the pinnacle of success as the world has defined it, are often miserable. Not all of them. There's many who are, right? And what then they end up being stuck and in a victim mentality in some ways, like, oh, I can't escape this, or oh, my history has shaped who I am, but they can't ever actually break free, and they feel stymied in their efforts to fulfill their potential. They're externally successful, but they're internally empty. And so often it's not the wrong strategy or tactics that's gotten them there, but that's how we force solutions down people's approach. If you just do this, you'll be successful. If you just do these 7 steps, you'll be successful. More often than not, it's a combination of emotional triggers and behavioral patterns that keeps them in that victim place, that keeps them from being free and experiencing joy and fulfillment.
This is the 3rd time you've used the word free in our conversation. At least the 3rd, at least. You may have said it more, maybe I was writing and you didn't, but you keep saying it.
I believe in
it. Free from what?
Free from the box and confines that the world defined for us. Because when we can align ourselves with who we are, not how the world has defined us, who we need to be, that is freedom. What happens is we're born as our most authentic burning light in life.
Okay.
Right?
Slow that
look at little
again.
kids.
Let's slow. You gotta wait too fast. You got so many. My God, there's not even any microphones left to drop. You're obviously wizardly smart, dude, and you make these comments, a bunch of them, and it's obvious you have thought this through a million times. You've spoken on this. You coach on this, right? You've got a lot of deep expert level wisdom on this. But I want to slow a few things down. So please apologize. I apologize. Yeah. Forgive me. This is not the last time I'm going to interrupt you.
Don't apologize. Yeah, keep doing it. We're good.
Yeah, because I just want people to hear it. All right. So repeat, please, and elaborate upon what you just said about when we're born.
We are born as the most authentic, bright, burning light that we will ever be.
Please explain what that means.
Have you ever been around a toddler?
Yes.
What's the rawness that you see?
Rawness? Raw?
Yeah,
That's an interesting word.
I use that word intentionally.
Yeah, I'm very interested in it. Okay, so the rawness that I see. Okay, so I see an unapologetic willingness to articulate with whatever ways possible when something isn't being addressed, right? If I'm physically uncomfortable, I see wide-eyed awe,
Yep.
right? Like a perpetual. In fact, let me start over. I see that first, and it's only occasionally interrupted by, like, if I have gas.
Yeah, right. But you see, you
from
used
hungry.
the word that was beautiful, by the way. You said unapologetic.
Mm,
2-year-olds don't have to ever defend who they are.
mm.
They just show up and they are.
Oh,
They
okay.
are
Oh, that's
free.
great. I love that. So it's like, so pre-educated about, like, self-consciousness.
They just are free.
Free to be you and me before being taught the value of prioritizing other people's opinions of
Correct.
you over
And
you.
then what happens after that? We as parents, teachers, coaches, employers start saying, you should do this. You shouldn't do that. You should be this. You shouldn't be that. You should follow this career path. You should define success this way. You should seek out. I mean, literally, we just layer people with all these layers of all the shoulds. And by the way, should is a shame-based word because it implies whatever you're doing isn't good enough. And so people start to literally, that light that was so bright starts to dwindle into just a glimmer of what it once was. And then what do we do as people in society? We train people to chase the what. What house, what car, what job, what amount of money, what level of success. And we further lose the who along the way. So it's no wonder when people wake up one day and yeah, they've reached a pinnacle of success, but they don't know who they are. They're miserable and they don't know what's next. They feel like they're grasping at straws for how to hold on to life. But when they can shed the layers of what the world has done to them, when they can throw off the armor that's protected them from vulnerability, that's actually been crushing them over time, not protecting them, and they get back and recalibrate with the who, the what becomes a manifestation of the who. So how do we create a structure where people can be the who from the time they're born till the time they're alive? Because the world screws us up and we've got to gain back control.
Okay, I don't want to get into the whole how come that seems like a vicious joke from evolution. I'm not going to get into theories of why that's the human experience. Let's just be in agreement that that's the human experience.
That's just what happens. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And sorry, that's our deal. I mean, like I love Alan Watts is one of my favorite teachers, and he he articulated on this. If we were asking, like, so why is that the case? Like, why do we got to do that? Why do we? And he goes, it's the ultimate game of hide and seek. We hide ourselves so we can find ourselves. It's the human deal, right? Each of us is an aperture.
I haven't heard that before like that. That's beautiful.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. The ultimate game of hide and seek. We hide ourselves so we can find ourselves. So it's just this we get to. Let's look at it like this is let's look at it that this is a thing that we get to do. Yeah, it's hard, but I hate that label's hard.
Yeah.
Unless it isn't. Unless it just is. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
But let's get into some practical house stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, what are some ways that people who are listening to this or watching this, what are some disciplines or practices that you like totally rely on in your work, helping people return to their authentic selves?
Yeah.
And regain the freedom that we all deserve?
Yeah. So it starts with awareness, right? Which we unpacked a little bit earlier, because what we're unaware of, we can't be intentional with. That's just a fact. And
okay, so how do you teach me how to be more aware?
Well, there's a whole lot of ways. I think it's about asking yourself the right questions, right? So literally leading yourself on an intrinsic journey to understand the patterns that have developed in your life, where and how those pivotal moments in your life have shaped who you are and the way that you've entered into the world. What emotional triggers exist for you? What's the root of those emotional triggers so that you can understand where they are lying to you in the real-time present, right? What do you want from life?
Okay.
What impact do you want to have? I'm throwing a bunch of questions because obviously I can't put it into a singular box real quick, but an intrinsic journey is important. But if you are not capable of asking yourself those questions, ask your loved ones. If you had to describe who I am, what would that look like to you? If you had to tell me where my blind spots are, what would that look like to you? If you had to tell me where the blocks are in my life, what would that look like to you? If you could take one thing from me and embed it into your own life, what would that be? Ask those that are closest to you, your spouses, your parents, your close friends, because you'll get a lot of feedback. And I guarantee you'll see some consistency, probably in a way that you don't see yourself clearly. So if you can't ask yourself those questions, ask those that are closest to you. And if those two things don't work, there's some phenomenal people who can guide you through the process. Therapists, counselors, coaches. Like, again, this isn't a pitch to say go. I work with multiple coaches myself because I have my own blind spots. As aware as I am, there's stuff I miss, period. But I'm not a believer that everybody's ready for a coach, which is why I say start with yourself. If you're incapable of asking those questions, ask those around you. This idea, though, of embracing pain to avoid suffering, because again, you said it again, it's hard. And I don't like that term either, but I also have to acknowledge that nothing worthwhile in life comes easy. Nothing. There's nothing that I truly appreciate, that I truly value, that's meaningful on a deep level, that's just happened in life, ever. Marriage is hard work. I have to work at it. Being a parent is hard work. I have to work at it. Being a son is hard work. I have to work at it. Those are all deeply meaningful to me, but they don't just happen. Those are roles that I have, but I can choose to invest in those roles to make those things even more meaningful. So how do we embrace pain to avoid suffering? I walk through 3 kind of basic steps, and they're going to sound a little abstract, but let's talk about them. The first is you have to acknowledge the suffering you wish to avoid. And I know you're sitting there like right now being like, really? You're going to like outline suffering? I've got to think more about suffering? Yeah, I am. But the flip side to that as well is the opposite of suffering is what do you really want in your life? So I have a client right now. He's 38 years old. He moved 26 times before he was 18. 26 times. He lived with his mom, his dad, his aunt, his grandma, rotated across those 4 over those 18 years. He never was in the same school twice, never had the same set of friends twice. Okay? He literally never learned how to give or receive love, and he always felt like a burden, so there was constant self-worth issues. Fast forward to today, 38 years old. He's got a beautiful wife, 2 beautiful daughters. Again, he never learned how to give or receive love. So he's going to operate in a nomad capacity and run whenever things get tough, because that's what always happened in his prior life. He doesn't understand how to have that deep, meaningful human connection and bond with his girls and his wife. And so he often isolates himself. Well, the idea of suffering for him is a life without them. That's very clear to him. There's no hesitation. So the counter to that is, what does he really want? He has this image of him sitting on his farm with his wife at 80 years old in Texas, with the wind blowing through the brush. And the only thing breaking the silence is the laughter of his daughters and his grandkids. When he has that image, I get chills every time I say it. When he has that image and he can burn that into his soul, the purpose becomes big enough to overtake the pain that's necessary for him to change, for him to understand his emotional triggers, for him to embrace the darkness of his past so that he can actually feel, so he can heal and start to move forward and create those bonds around human connection that all of us are hardwired to desire. If he doesn't make those changes, suffering is almost guaranteed, right? Mm-hmm. Because he's going to drive away his wife and his girls without him ever wanting to, because he doesn't know how to give or receive love. The next step is that we have to identify the pains that we tend to avoid and learn to embrace them. I'll use my own step 2. I'll use my own example on this one. I don't have a tricep in my left arm. My biceps microcalis from my leg. My lat is gone on the left side of my back. I literally have a curve in my spine. 15 to 20 years ago, it started to develop into suffering. It was debilitating pain in my back to the point that it was affecting my lifestyle. And so I realized that if I stayed lean, I kept my core strong, I ate well, and I overall was active and strengthened my back, that suffering wasn't suffering. It was a manageable pain. It wasn't debilitating. I could operate in life through that. So what did I do? I went and I joined a gym, because that's what you do when you want to get healthy, right? And I went consistently for 30 days, and then I stopped going. Now that's where most people stop. And this isn't an effort to like pat myself on the chest and be like, oh, Brian, no, not at all. But like, I knew how important it was for me to avoid that suffering. So I had to dig a little deeper. So I had to ask myself, is it the pain of working out, the pain of lifting weights, the pain of cardio, the pain of like actually physical movement that I'm avoiding? Or is it the anxiety I get in the crowded gym? It was definitive. It was the anxiety I got in the crowded gym. So I had to embrace the pain of creating the time, energy, and space to build out my own gym at my house so that I could create an environment that would be successful for me so that I could do what I needed to do to move forward. The third step I'm going to brush over really quick because it's really something we've already talked about, but it's establishing as a habit in all areas of our life. Right? I gave establishing it as a habit in all areas of our life. You know, I gave 4 or 5 examples when I talked about what this concept was, and you can see that it really touches everything in our life. And so again, it's about where and how do I view this as an investment in my future self? And one of the tips I give anybody, if you're trying to figure out how to embrace the pains, you're trying to establish a new habit, one of the most effective ways is to attach it to an existing habit loop. Okay? So where and how do you look at your day? Where, like, what are things that you do every day? Do I get up every day? I go to the bathroom first, then I brush my teeth, then I get dressed, then I have my coffee, right? Look at the patterns that already exist because they're there. All of us have them. And then figure out, how do I attach one more thing to that habit loop? Because if you're already in the process of doing it and you don't have to create it out of cold nothingness, you're going to be more successful in doing it. The other piece is start small. Start small. You don't have to boil the ocean overnight. And the compound effect of these habits over time is profound. If you just gave yourself 5 minutes a day, that's it, to focus on yourself 5 minutes a day, 365 days a year, you've just given yourself 30 hours that you've invested in yourself over the course of a year. So it's
you did that math earlier.
I've told that one before, if you couldn't tell. But I mean, it's that's what we know, right? Like, you've heard this quote. I wish I could give it an attribution to it, but it's like, people are celebrated in public for what they've practiced in private for years. Mm. It's the small things done consistently that we know compound over time. And I always say that consistency is the key. Relentless consistency unlocks.
Oh, that's another thing worth repeating.
Consistency is the key. Relentless consistency unlocks.
That's super great. You put out a lot of stuff, man. What should we, now I'm going to make sure that we include, brianbogert.com is your website.
Yep.
And it's very dynamic. You get a lot of stuff. Do you have 3 podcasts?
Where are you getting that?
All right. I'm on the internet, babe. I looked you up. I don't know. I saw on your website.
There's Bogert's Bullets.
Oh, yeah. Let's just talk about that for a second. Talk about Bogert's Bullets. That's badass. Well, I look for where I think I saw.
Bogert's Bullets is basically a 3 to 5 minute topic of a week. And we literally look at what the topic is, we unpack it, and how do we apply it, and then that's it. So it's real hard hitting, 3 to 5 minutes max. And that's been something that's consistently grown over the years. That's been a little fun thing. They're not scripted. It's literally inspiration and idea pops into my head. I turn on the camera and I freestyle and riff on it and try to add some value into the world and send it off to my content team. It gets produced and put out. So
love it. So that's one of the tabs on your website. I don't know where I saw the 3 podcasts. Are you a podcaster? I know you do jillions. You appear on jillions of podcasts, but you have your own.
I do not yet.
Okay, but right. So I don't know where I saw
that. It is being launched like any day now. So stay tuned on that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I found somebody that I wanted to partner with on it. I didn't want to run one by myself. I wanted to have another person that could be a curator of conversation with me.
Do you have
That'll be going live here pretty soon.
Do you have a title for that or not yet?
Yeah, it's going to be called Who Not What.
All right. Who Not What. Nice. I like it.
You know, I've been on a lot of podcasts. Yeah, I've been on 150 in the last 6 months. I'm a founder of a podcast community that we launched early this year that has already grown pretty significantly. We did a whisper launch on it. We had 50 shows join within 36 hours, and we've got about another 100 on the wait list that we're going to be opening up here for phase 2 pretty soon. But it's a community to bring podcasters together to focus on community collaboration and collective impact. Reality of it is, it's community first. There is now and will always be a free option. You know, what existed out in the world is, there's a lot of networks. There will be a network component to this as well. But we wanted to focus on community first and bringing like-minded, mission, impact-driven individuals together, because together we can have a broader audience, and when we can help them plug into a bigger platform, that's when shows will start to blow up. And so it's been really cool to see how that's been developing so far. I've got a marriage hacks theme. My wife and I started. So it's not Bogert's Bullets, but it's a little bit longer form content that we release. It's not, we joke about it. It's like marriage hacks with the Bogerts, but it's really 2 hacks that talk about things that have worked for us. Like, it's not that it's like gold wisdom. It's just, this is how we've navigated it. And then we also have created, for lack of a better term, a vlog. And the reason that we did that is, I have this, we talk a lot about intellectual content, right? and Bogert's Bullets and a lot of podcasts and different things are like concept and abstract, esoteric, application. And a lot of people want to see behind the curtain, right? And so my content strategist was brilliant when he came up with this, because he said, Brian, like, people seem to be fascinated with how you live. I was like, okay, why? I don't really live that exciting a life, right? I do me. I don't really put much stake on it. But he said, there's vloggers who can create story with the way that they live. There's speakers and coaches that create intellectual content. There's nobody that's doing both. And so we decided that we were going to start to do this, because I have this idea of no limits living. Like, what does that mean to be radical authenticity? Like, how do we lean into this? And so that vlog launched earlier this year. We've got 2 episodes out right now. The 3rd one's dropping any minute. We're going to be about a month behind always on that, because we're consistently kind of documenting throughout the day. But that's a new little venture that will be kind of fun and kind of brings people into the world of like, where and how do these concepts actually apply in my life? And I'm showing them behind the curtain.
Beautiful. Now, you just mentioned no limits. So you have a course.
I do.
You have a course in 2 forms of it called No Limits. Yeah.
Yeah. It's called, it's actually called No Limits U, which, it's the play on the whole university, but it's U, Y-O-U. And the whole point on that is again, we've put a lot of thought, energy, and instruction into helping people guide themselves on an intrinsic journey. Some people don't need a coach, right? Some people don't need group coaching. Some people want just a self-led model where they can just go through that journey themselves. So we really have, from the bare basic bones, we have the No Limits playbook that people can access. We've got the No Limits self-led course. We have the No Limits group course, so that there's some built-in accountability, and we've got some coaches that guide through that. And then there's the one-to-one stuff that I do, which I kind of cap my one-to-one coaching typically at about 20 people in my ecosystem at any given time. Because to your point, I'm also an entrepreneur, so I'm building stuff and doing things every day.
Yeah, right.
And I love that work. But to go there, I've got to go really deep. So I'm not trying to get 100 people to one-to-one coach with me. Right. But yeah, and then we've got a free resource that compares with all of that, right? Because to impact 1 billion lives, I'm very aware that 99.99999999999% will never pay us $1. I'm very okay with that. So if you are looking for a free resource, go to nolimitprelude.com. So it's literally the prelude that leads before the playbook, that leads before the No Limits courses, but that leads before, and it's a really succinct format of a lot of our coaching philosophies to ask some of those questions for yourself on guiding yourself through that intrinsic journey and starting to learn to embrace pain, to avoid suffering, and really calibrating with who you are. So
that's amazing. I hadn't seen that yet. No, is that? It's
not on the website. It's a separate landing page. Okay. It's going to be embedded into the website soon. We're doing some updates there, but for now, that's where it is.
Yeah, nolimitprelude.com.
Yep.
Yeah, you're really active on social media. You have an active LinkedIn account. You're active on Instagram. You're active on Facebook. So I'll make sure I include all, and YouTube.
Yep. I'm at Bogert Brian on pretty much all the platforms. And so if you just remember that handle, you can probably find me.
Just your name backwards, Bogert Brian?
Exactly.
Well, not really backwards, but I mean, last name.
Yeah.
Yeah, good deal. Right on, brother. Man, I'll tell you, I'm going to have to re-listen to this in slow-mo. Normally, I listen to podcasts and speed them up. I got to put this one on halftime.
I speak fast, man. This is me. I'm sorry.
It's not just but in addition to that, you're dropping all these wisdom bombs. So, wait, what was that? So, thank you, brother. This has been truly dynamic conversation. I got
to show this, man.
Well,
it's because of you, brother.
Huh? Twinsies.
There it is.
Yours is a little more iron than mine, but yeah,
mine just came out of the package, so I don't even know how that's possible.
That's how I live. So I'm a wrinkly.
Just a wrinkled life.
Just an old wrinkled up bag shirt. So yeah, that's cool. That's fun. It was just as a side on that because it's pretty fun. So I have that new project, and I'm trying to not promoting that right here. I have a project that's going on, involves mental toughness sayings and mantras on shirts, and I offered you one.
Dude, I'm grateful. I will.
I sent you to the site, and I knew damn well there's like 27 phrases on there. And I said, here, I know which one you're going to pick. Duh.
You knew.
Well, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure that out. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Embrace the pain, avoid the suffering. Brian Bogert, you the man. Thanks so much for sharing all this with my Tough Talks tribe today, bud.
Well, Chris, thank you for building a platform to put good into the world, brother. That's the only reason I have the pleasure to be with you today. So thank you.
Amen. All right. Talk again soon. So did anyone who's watching or listening to this not pause or rewind like about 10 times to say, wait, what was that? That sounded like a real, wait, what did he just say? That was amazing. What was that? I don't think I totally got that. I'm going to be having to listen, not having to, I get to listen to this all over again. You saw me. I was like, I think I gave up trying to take notes at one point because I'm like, it's not working. The guy's dropping too many wisdom bombs in too little time for me to try to capture this. Thank God for technology, right? Well, that was great. I knew it would be. He and I only connected fairly recently, and definitely two birds of a feather. So I hope that you really enjoyed Brian Bogert. And check him out, especially that NoLimitsPrelude.com. Not necessarily especially that, but I mean, I haven't even looked at it, so I'm going to take a look at that now. NoLimitsPrelude.com. And of course, his website is BrianBogert.com. So, all right, folks, thanks again for tuning in to Tough Talks. And until next time, create miracles.